Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Matt Continetti, or just Continetti on X, is the head of domestic policy studies at the American Enterprise Institute, columnist for the Free Press, and contributor to Commentary. And that's where I want to begin, Matt. I listened yesterday, and I had wholly forgotten the Wellstone debacle, and I've done nothing but talk about it since to try and immunize people headed to Charlie's memorial service against that. Do you think the immunities are up against that kind of a debacle?
I have confidence, Hugh. I'm considering the way in which Kirk's widow has responded to the assassination, the outpouring of support for Charlie Kirk among young people throughout the nation. I do think that the memorial service this weekend will show our better natures and speak to what he believed both politically as well as spiritually and culturally. You know, I brought up the example of the Wellstone Memorial on the Commentary podcast this week because it does seem to me to be a cautionary example. After Paul Wellstone was killed in a plane crash in 2002, the memorial service that was held for him really turned not only into a Democratic political rally ahead of the midterm election, but a very kind of vitriolic attack on Republicans and independents who were in the crowd. And that, I think, really hurt the Democratic candidates' chances, Walter Mondale, the former vice president, from really taking Wellstone's seat in the Senate. So I as much as I do think that this will be an uplifting, sobering, reassuring event this weekend, I think we also need to be mindful that it could sometime, if it goes in the wrong direction, could have a boomerang effect on the way in which the country
people are in deep grief.
Charlie.
Mm-hmm. They're in deep grief and they're shocked. What I worry about is there will be knuckleheads outside from the other side, and there will be plants in a crowd of thousands who will stand up and try and disrupt. They might even run onto the field. And the networks for sporting events don't cover that. They don't cut away to that. Will our networks be disciplined enough not to elevate the marginal to the middle?
Well, we just don't know. And I think that some of our liberal networks are going to be inclined to show the division. And so we're just going to have faith that security will be able to handle any disruption, and that, as we've seen in Trump rallies in the past, the crowd tries to cover for whatever is happening and tries to return the attention to the speakers where it belongs. But because the country is so unsettled right now, I think you're right to be worried about these sorts of things. And nothing that's happened in the week that since Kirk was killed has made me think that we're anywhere closer to having the left understand what Charlie Kirk meant to so many millions of Americans.
The opposite. I hope they don't chant USA. I hope they chant God Bless Charlie. If they have to overcome the screamers and the banners that unfurl and the secret people who smuggle in propaganda that is hurtful. But we will see. I'll be watching it. I haven't seen anything. Ro Khanna came closest, but he is, not unlike Paul Wellstone, a very smart progressive. Have you seen anyone who did the Shirley Chisholm going to visit George Wallace after his assassination attempt that Eli Lake did a podcast about?
No, I mean, I really haven't. I mean, the closest maybe was Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania, who gave a speech on political violence this week. It was not very well covered. Of course, the very next day he had to deal with that awful attack on police officers in his state. But even he spoke more about his own experience, the governor's mansion being attacked by a pro-Hamas sympathizer earlier this year during the Jewish holiday of Passover. And on the contrary, we just saw this vote in the House on the resolution honoring and affirming Charlie Kirk and his legacy, and I believe 58 Democrats voted against it. So you see there just the divide. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to talk with Matt during the break about Mike Waltz being confirmed this afternoon to the UN. When we come back on the other side, we'll talk about Jimmy Kimmel. But during the break, and it'll be on the One Big Weekend pod, which is available wherever podcasts are available, all of everything, including the intermissions that Matt and I have for broadcast purposes, will be included. And during that, we'll talk about the very good news that Ambassador Mike Waltz will be there for UNGA next week, and to oppose the ridiculous idea of recognizing a Palestinian state while Hamas still has guns. Stay tuned, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Welcome back. I've got Matt Continetti. Earlier this afternoon, on Friday afternoon, Michael Waltz was confirmed as the United States ambassador to the United Nations just in time for the UNGA, which is the gathering of the world leaders in New York. And I thought it was important to have him there. What do you think, Matt Continetti?
Oh, it's absolutely important. Mike Waltz is a very talented man. He's a great spokesman for America and for peace through strength. I think he'll make a great UN representative. It's amazing it took this long for the Senate to confirm him. And of course, it involves the procedural decisions to go nuclear in some cases of Trump nominees. But I'm glad he's going to be there. And Hugh, I just add that the UN, I'm a sharp critic of the UN. I don't like the UN at all. But often the UN responds to what America puts in it. If we have a strong advocate for America in that role, you can actually, I think, make some waves and get the institution to pay attention. And I expect that's what Mike Waltz will be doing.
I think Jean Kirkpatrick and Daniel Patrick Moynihan are very high bars to meet, but especially as they vote on a Palestinian state. I thought the exchange at the press conference yesterday, where some lefty from the BBC asked President Trump when he'll end the killing in Gaza, illustrates the problem that our ambassador has to overcome. And you've got to be nimble and you got to be quick.
Yes, I mean, the UN's been a den of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism for decades, and we need an American representative to the UN who can stand for Israel and condemn the UN when it goes down it continues to go down this anti-Semitic path. And this kind of ridiculous recognition of a Palestinian state that doesn't exist and will never exist is just another instance of the UN's ignominy.
Do you think it rewards Hamas? We got 30 seconds.
It absolutely rewards Hamas. Remember, the ceasefire negotiations ended when the European governments started pledging to recognize a Palestinian state, rewarding Hamas for the terrorism, for the murder, and for the holding of these captives now almost for 2 years.
Well said. I'll be right back with Matt Continetti on the other side. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Matt Continetti remains my guest. Matt, on Monday night of this week, Jimmy Kimmel said ridiculous things that were a lie. And Brendan Carr, the chairman of the FCC, said we can do this the easy way or the hard way, indicating he was going to call for an investigation into the public interest. He didn't do anything, though, and he's well within his rights to say that. Indeed, he has a framework statutory that surrounds him that obliges him to do that when he thinks it's been crossed. But all of a sudden, we have the beat-up Brendan Carr movement by people who judge themselves constitutional experts who've never actually we're right now on an FCC-regulated platform. If you use one of the 7 dirty words, I'm going to pay $1,000 for every outlet over which that is heard, because there are children in the car and the FCC framework exists for a reason. So we may or may not agree on this. I think Brendan Carr was within his rights. What do you think?
I think we could have expected what Brendan Carr said, because he's made no bones about the fact that he believes in the public interest language in the FCC authorizing statute, and he believes that it's a conservative's role to enforce that, just as much as liberals have been using the FCC to shape the broadcast spectrum and the broadcast networks for decades. Now, would I have put it the way that Brendan Carr put it? No. Would I maybe have stayed out of it so that what was really happening, which was audience outrage, justified outrage at Jimmy Kimmel's lie, and the affiliates' deep concern that Jimmy Kimmel would go back on the air and refuse to apologize and attack MAGA even more? Would I rather have that be the real story? Yes. But nonetheless, what's done is done. And Jimmy Kimmel has been suspended indefinitely for making a falsehood, a defamation. And I think that's not endangering anyone's First Amendment rights.
Well, I was shocked today because your colleague, you weren't on the Friday podcast, Christine Rosen, for whom I have immense respect, nevertheless let fly with, you're not a real conservative if you don't condemn Brendan Carr. That's a paraphrase. And I thought to myself, I'm a rule of law conservative. The FCC regulated broadcast stations are licensees of the public spectrum. They're different than cable, podcast, and the street corner. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. Do you think people don't understand the FCC's role with broadcast outlets?
They certainly don't understand it, Hugh. And I think that because we're in such a tough moment and a very politicized moment, we're rushing to make a lot of hysterical judgments about what's happening here. I don't believe the people who have faced firing or other sanction for either celebrating Kirk's death or rationalize it are the victims of a cancel culture. That's not what cancel culture is. Cancel culture is turning up politically incorrect or contrarian opinions in order to hound people out of public life. Having people pay a price for glorifying murder is not cancel culture. And in the case of Jimmy Kimmel, we just have to recognize the fact that his reaction to the murder of Charlie Kirk was to perpetuate the falsehood that the assassin was a member of the MAGA movement. We know that not to be the case. And that alone was reason
and to be indifferent. His sin wasn't the political sin. His sin was indifference to grief. I mean, there's a lot of real grief among a lot of people. N.T. Wright referenced a poem by a British poet, Francis Thompson, sort of a Catholic mystic, who wrote, "But when so sad and canst not sadder cry, and upon sigh sore so a loss, shall shine the traffic of Jacob's ladder pitched between heaven and Charing Cross." He was capturing the fact that sometimes you can't cheer people up. You can't look past the wound. People who don't want to indulge grief for even a week, aren't they kind of indecent?
Well, there's certainly an indecency there, but I also have been just kind of puzzled by the fact that Kimmel's suspension is generating much more outrage among elite institutions than Kirk's assassination in public. And I think, once again, we have half the country that just cannot recognize Charlie Kirk and the important part he played in the lives of millions of Americans. And I think there's a real sense of loss, not just among the conservatives for losing Kirk, but I think among these liberals are sense that they no longer control the culture in the way that they once did. And that's contributing kind of to just the over-the-top language, kind of calling Trump and the right the very names that have contributed to this kind of burgeoning acceptance of political violence on the left.
Now, I think decency remains on the center left. I really do. A lot of people haven't piled on here, but it's gone. And I think the Democrats are in danger of going the way of the Whigs. And by that, I mean becoming irrelevant to the country. The fact that we can't read, our kids can't read, the fact that culture is coarse. Do you think they're in danger of going over the cliff? Because we're sort of assuming a 45-45-10 split. And I'm beginning to wonder if Trump hasn't broken that.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't know what the next election will bring, Hugh, but I do know that the Democrats are becoming the Democratic Socialist Party. It's not the Democratic Party. It's now becoming the Democratic Socialist Party. And that is a very different Democratic Party than I think any of us are used to. And it's one that is much more radical than the Democratic Party has ever been. And to listen to the Zoran Mamdanis or AOC, or listen to the just disgusting way that Ilhan Omar has behaved since Charlie Kirk's assassination, you begin to see a glimpse of what that Democratic Socialist Party looks like. And I think it will frighten and repel most Americans.
And the one guy who's not going to let it slide is Donald Trump. Second guy who's not going to let it slide is J.D. Vance. They're rhetorically gifted at pointing out what you just underscored, that it's not your father's Democratic Party. Matt Continetti, always a pleasure to talk to you. Follow